Thank you very much, Madam President. I want to thank Senator Tyrrell for bringing on this very important motion, and I want to start by saying it's very clear that Senator Sheldon does not understand anything about school funding, because he's just profoundly misled the Senate. The fact of the matter is that under the Gonski school funding model, the Commonwealth is meeting its share of public school funding, which is 20% of the schooling resource standard. And Senator Tyrrell is quite right, as she spells out in this motion, that the shortfall is the responsibility of the states. And in fact, only the ACT is meeting 80%, the full share. 20 plus 80, of course, is 100% of the SRS. And so I'm just going to go through the table of contributions to demonstrate where the shortfall is. So New South Wales is at 72.2%, Victoria 70.43%, Queensland 69.26%, South Australia is at 75%, WA at 75%, Tasmania almost at 74.08%, and the Northern Territory a very dismal 59%. So the failure is occurring at the state level. And I do also want to place on record the ridiculous and pathetic misrepresentation of Senator Sheldon in relation to Commonwealth funding under the former coalition government, because the fact is that schools funding under the former coalition government nearly doubled from $13 billion to $25.3 billion. And the shortfall in funding for public schools, which absolutely deserve full funding, is courtesy of the states. But what is extraordinary about this school funding war, which Labor has now created, is it misled Australians. Because, Madam President, Labor went to the election promising full and fair funding. And while the states are seriously delivering a shortfall in relation to what it should be contributing to public schools under the Gonski funding model, the fact of the matter is that Labor misled Australians, and I think it's fair to say misled the states, because when it talked about full and fair funding, the states took that to mean that the Commonwealth contribution to public schools was going to increase from 20% to 25%. And so now, with the exception of WA and the Northern Territory, which have reached deals in principle with the federal government, we have a full-scale funding war courtesy of this incompetent Labor Education Minister, who is offering only 2.5% more, and the states are saying no deal. And even worse than that, the National School Reform Agreement, which has been delayed for more than a year because this incompetent minister cannot deliver the reforms that Australian students and parents deserve. And we know that we have a dire situation in this country with 1 in 3 children failing NAPLAN. And despite what Senator Sheldon has said, in the last couple of years under Labor, we now have a full-blown teacher shortage crisis. Attendance levels have got worse, and our international PISA results are stagnating but showing long-term decline, and the average Year 10 student is a full year behind in their learning compared to 20 years ago. So it is a dire situation, and this incompetent government has not bothered to deliver the reforms that we know will lift school standards, that we know will allow each and every child to reach his or her best potential. So I say shame on this government. Stop misleading the parliament. Don't mislead the Australian people. Get on with this job. Resolve the school funding war that you have created, because, frankly, what we have seen from this government is an absolute shambles. Declining school standards, a schools funding war, no action on indoctrination in schools, the shocking attack on non-government schools, including the potential loss of DGR status for school library funds and school shallot funds, the teacher shortage crisis, the failure to do anything on classroom disruption, which is also driving very poor results, and the failure of this government to stand up to anti-Semitism